Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of the Pedalshift Project Live. Thank you so much for joining this holiday edition. Sorry I'm a little bit late here getting started. The pugs that you may be able to see here in the live stream if you're joining us on YouTube, they are kind of out of camera right now, but I had a couple of pugs that were sort of like, oh, I'm fine, I'm cool, I don't need to go outside, and then all of a sudden, like maybe 30 seconds before 9 p.m. Eastern, were like full on desperately needed to go outside. So we had to take care of that. Otherwise, we would have had mayhem. Now, we all know that in past episodes of Pedalshift Live, we've had scraps. So I do not guarantee this will be a scrap-free podcast. So we'll see how that all goes. New setup. I think I do a different setup for every single show. I don't know why. I think it's just something a little bit different. I'm in DC tonight, as you probably have figured out. I'm a little distracted because I'm still doing some of the audio setup, so bear with me on that. If you are brand new to the live episodes, welcome. This is a little bit different than probably you're used to with the podcast because, you press the little machine and my voice comes out and all of that. Now I'm actually here live saying hello to you. And what we do is we record, I record, you listen to a brand new episode that I produce here in front of you live magically here on YouTube. You get to watch the video version of it. You get to watch me play around with the microphone ahead of time. And you also get to see some of the mayhem that can result in the sausage making of podcasts. So that's, I guess, exciting, but it's fun. We also get to talk to each other in the chat box. So if you are, if you just click play over at pedalshift.net/live, awesome. Step one. Step two, if you would like to actually join us in the chat room, you'll actually want to go to, there's one of the pugs. You'll actually want to go to the YouTube page itself, which is some weird, long, YouTube-y kind of thing. Just click on the image that I have at pedalshift.net/live. That'll take you straight to the page, and then there's an actual chat box here. So we've got some folks already in the room. We've got Scott from Chiang Mai, Thailand, which is, I believe, my first Thailand representation for the live show. Thank you, Scott, for showing up for this. I don't know what time it is. It's probably tomorrow, so tell us what the future is like and other things that are... That's kind of a dad joke. I think that's right into dad joke territory. Let's see, Stick String, a return victim from Manistee, Michigan, beautiful Michigan. I think I've mentioned this before. I've got family from Michigan, mom's side of the family, all from there. Brother went to the U of M. Let's see, and I think who else is in there? Oh, poor Byron Patterson, who I need to make an apology for, or apology to, publicly here. I have, for multiple episodes since he has joined the Pedalshift Society and helped to support the show. So he has monetarily shown support for this fine program, and I have rewarded him by calling him Brian Patterson. Every single time I thank him at the end of every show. So yes, I will endeavor to fix that for episode number 145 and beyond. Thank you, Byron Patterson, and mea culpa, as we say in the legal biz. Let's see. Feel free to say hello, everybody inside the chat box, where you're from. I think I've mentioned this. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and it is cold and wintry, and it went, I think, from... let's see, winter to a little bit of fall to like straight on winter. And apparently there's a shot of us having a big winter storm this weekend, diminishing, but apparently possible. So here we are, full on off season. And that's why this episode is going to be dedicated to what bike touring folks should do during the off season. Many of you don't have off seasons, so you get to pretend commiserate with the rest of us who have real serious off seasons. And I actually have some methods to avoid off seasons in my list. We'll get to that later on the show when we actually do the podcast. We'll be starting that live in a little bit. Let's see, I'm going to go to my show notes because I put all of the thoughts on what I wanted to do with the pre-show banter in writing, because my brain, as I have aged, has become, let's see, what's the technical term for it? Junk. Absolute junk. So I have to write notes down. Chris Lang from Montgomery County, Maryland originally, and in Johnson City, Tennessee. Welcome, sir. I'll give you a volunteer status for that. My girlfriend, who is not present here, she's in New York City having a girls' weekend with our friends from Montreal, or her friend from Montreal. This is a long thing. I won't get too complicated. She's in New York with a friend from Montreal. She is going to the University of Tennessee for a some kind of a grad degree in like animal assisted therapy, which I think will be very interesting. So it's like a distance thing. So add University of Tennessee to her her list of credentials when all is said and done. But I digress. Let's see. We're going to go into, well, where are you all joining from? We've been doing that. So anybody else who's in the room who wants to say where you're at, please let me know. Byron, not Brian. Byron Patterson, who I will never forget your name, Byron, is in Melbourne, Australia. And I think I pronounced that with the R. Byron, you should tell me, because I've always wondered this. I know that with an Australian accent, it's more like, and I'm going to butcher your accent. I'm so sorry. Melbourne. It's ridiculous for someone with an American accent to say that, correct? Because I remember when the Olympics were in Australia, the guy on Good Morning America would do that. He'd call Melbourne, and it sounded really ridiculous. I'm just curious what a real Australian would think about that. I assume you're a real Australian, not just located in Melbourne, or Melbourne, as I will learn in a moment. So anybody else wants to let me know the pronunciation of the city you're in, feel free. Let's see. We are going to be talking about... let me do a little bit in the pre-show section, talk a touch about my Brompton, which you see all folded up behind me here. Of course, that was featured in my most recent tour video and the last bunch of episodes of the show. Interestingly enough, I had to use it the other day to get the broken Jeep fixed again, except it's still broken. Long story on that. But the interesting thing was I got my first flats on the Brompton, which has never happened. In fact, it's really rare I get flats on Schwalbe Marathon tires, and these are sort of close to the Schwalbe Marathon Pluses, which are freaking bulletproof. I still couldn't find the problem in the tube when I got it off. But the most interesting thing, of course, is when you've got a bike like this, which has got an internal hub, you've got weirdness. It's not the same as changing a flat on a traditional bike. So this was my first time doing it. So of course I'm here in this room here doing all of this with YouTube videos and stuff like that. But I wanted to give another shout out to the toolkit that you can get as an extra with the Brompton. This fits inside the tubes when it's folded, but it's got every single tool that you need. And I was a real fan. It had everything I needed. This basically was the tool, the wrench, that 15 millimeter wrench that got everything off of it. And it was actually not as bad of a process as I thought it was going to be, but it was slow AF, as the kids say. I'm telling you, I was positive I was going to break the bike and have to bring it in, and I don't know. It ended up working out, but I was going to video it, but then I thought it would be the longest, slowest, lamest video ever, and I'm glad I did not video the actual physical doing it. But I'm going to probably do a field flat change, or at least pretend to, maybe on the CNO at some point, because I think it's actually kind of important for people to understand how to do something like that in the field, and I want to be able to learn how to show how to do that a little bit more. So that's going to be coming in a future video coming up. All right, let's see. We got some more people checking in. We've got Chelsea. I'm not seeing an EA, so I'm going to see Chesla, there we go, pronunciations, in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a beautiful state. And I will hesitate to note, Wisconsin, I think I'm saying Wisconsin right, as Wisconsinites would say, because it's a S. Anyways. And Byron, we say Melbourne like your second one, but everyone has their own accent. Okay, I'm going to pronounce the R. Because I think that's a little more accent appropriate for me. So Melbourne, but I'll go light on the R so that it's at least a little bit closer, showing respect to Melbourne. All right. Let's see. So we talked about the Brompton. I want to give, before we started recording the show as well, while we kind of get a few more people to filter in. And by the way, super global audience. We got folks in the States. We've got folks all across the States. We've got folks in Australia. We've got folks in, oh, forgive me, I already forgot, Thailand. Cheapers. That's amazing. God bless the internet. Oh, beer. Tonight's beer, should hesitate to mention, not sponsored by anybody, but hey, I've become a fan. If you've got a Trader Joe's in your town, become a fan of their private label chocolate stout. I don't know if this when I look at the camera, it's coming in backwards, but it's the Boatswain chocolate stout. It is not the best chocolate stout out there, but I will tell you, it is one of the cheapest chocolate stouts that you can get. The 6-pack was like $4.99 US. That is pretty inexpensive, and it's way more delicious than you would expect for a $4.99 a 6-pack. So anyways, that's what I'll be enjoying tonight. But as you know, if you've been watching the live show, I have this great thought process. That is not a sentence. I think that I'm going to drink more beer and enjoy more beer than I actually do because I have to talk so GD much on one of these things. So I'm going to take a quick sip. New check-in. We got Brian from Tejas. Welcome, sir. It is Texas, a wonderful state. Let's see. The pod. For those of you who are on the live stream here on YouTube, I thought it would give you sort of the newslettery heads up. Folks who get the newsletter every month, assuming I send it, which is not always true, they get sort of a roadmap of what the shows are going to be looking like for the month to the extent that I have them planned out. It so happens that I have December all planned out. Yesterday, you heard the Best Of show, which actually, if you look at the statistics, as I am wont to do from time to time, that episode number 15 was, if you kind of adjust for stuff like time and things like that, that was one of the more popular episodes of the show of all time. And I think it was because the topics were pretty cool. That was the episode that covered critter protection, how to hang a bear bag, and also, let's see, what else did I do? Oh, gearing for dummies. And I did a follow-up on that in a later episode as well. If you haven't checked out the Best Of that went out yesterday, check it out. It's a really good one. Show notes are all at pedalshift.net/015, and there's some good stuff in there, including the video on how to hang a bear bag, which I think is a underrated skill to have. And this particular method is called the PCT method, the Pacific Crest Trail method. And I definitely recommend it. Take a look at that. I think it's a really good tool to have as a bike tourist if you're doing camping and you don't have facilities to keep your food safe. So check that all out. This show, this very show that you have joined us here for, is going to be the podcast for next week, next Thursday. And now we're starting to kind of just go right into the holiday season. It is night 6 of Hanukkah tonight. If you're celebrating, I think happy Hanukkah is what I should say. And let's see, we got Christmas and all the other wonderful holidays coming towards the end of the month. The quasi Christmas episode is going to be an interview that I actually recorded today with Keith from Pennsylvania, and it is a fantastic interview about his adventures doing a roll your own kind of route through the Gulf Coast of the United States. And it was a great interview, a lot of interesting stuff. He had some very unique, cannot be very unique. He had unique challenges on his ride. So Keith was going to try to make it tonight. I don't know if he's in the room, but Keith, if you're here, thank you again for joining. And we'll see you the week right before Christmas. The week after that will be the last show of 2018. And that one, now, in years past, it has been the Pedalshift Holiday Spectacular. It will still be the Pedalshift Holiday Spectacular, but it's going to be a little bit different this year. I do have guests. I have stuff lined up. I'm not going to say anything yet because, sometimes things, you have plans and the plans sometimes fall through. Well, I'm hoping that this all works out because these plans are really good. And I think the show would be kind of fun. So that'll wrap up the year. That'll get us through. And we are marching towards episode number 150, which will have, I think, sometime in January, if I'm not mistaken. One other thing, not only are there, episode 150 coming in January, but I've got kind of a bunch of special things that I'm kind of planning as we go forward into 2019. One of those things is actually kind of gurgling up. It just kind of popped up yesterday, and it's a little early. I don't want to start promoting it yet, but it will be in January. And if it works out, I think it's going to be very, very cool. So stay tuned for all of that. That would actually be a live in-person event. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And forgive the pugs for doing their pug things. All right, we are, I think, about ready to record the show, so I'm going to take another sip of my fine chocolate stout here. Dog amongst yourselves. Again, chat box. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is the Ask Me Anything segment. That's going to come after I do the segment in the lab regarding things to do in a bike touring off-season. So if you've got any questions that you want to throw at me for the Ask Me Anything segment, I've actually got a few already in the queue, but I am super, super happy to get more of them. Either ask them in the chat box when we get to that segment, or perhaps even better yet, send an email to me during the show here at pedalshift@pedalshift.net, and then I will answer it because it is an Ask Me Anything segment. Never done one of those before. I keep threatening to, but we're going to do it tonight. All right, ladies and gentlemen. and pugs of all ages. We're about to start the show. If this is your first time entertaining Pedalshift Live, first of all, you know that pugs are a major part of it. This is Belle Starr. This is the touring pug. She is being a bit of a pill tonight. Anyways, I'm hoping she will not scratch anymore as I try to record the actual show, because that is kryptonite for podcasts, like, extra sounds. So what I'm going to do is I take a little bit of a pause prior to the beginning of the show. And what that does, sausage making podcast information here for you. What that does is it allows me to capture what we call room noise in the biz, and then I can remove said room noise. And that's why my podcasts allegedly sound halfway decent. So a little bit of a pause, and then we will jump into the show. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/145, and email the show pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline 202-930-1109, and you can check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello everybody on the YouTube. Hello everybody on the podcast. This is a live show, episode number 145 of the show. We are live, baby, live, as I like to say. And this episode is a real fun one. This is the last live episode of the season, of the year, and we'll have the season too. And that's why we're going to be in the lab talking a little bit about things to do in a bike touring off season. We're also going to take advantage of the fact that this is a live show and do an Ask Me Anything segment, which basically means you can, as you can probably figure it out, ask me anything. So folks who are in the live studio audience can go ahead and do that. Pedalshift@pedalshift.net. If you are listening to this not so live, you'll just get to listen to the questions and the answers, I guess. But you can always send me emails. I fairly frequently answer them, as many of you know. So anyways, the excitement about this episode, of course, is getting into the lab. So let's kick that off. Those of you who are in the live stream, you know that there's like the little ratchety thing. If you've been here before, you know that I always get all excited about the fact that, here's where sound effect happens, and I just announce it. And then I cut this part out because this would be a terrible part of a podcast. But I get to drink a beer. Cheers, everybody. All right, we're going to kick this show off with the lab. And the lab is where we do segments on experimental things, or things that kind of help maybe make your bicycle touring a little bit better. So on this episode of the show, I wanted to share the thoughts that I've got on, well, basically things to do in a bike touring off season. As I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C. right now, it is, I think, in the mid to low 30s. We are starting to get regular threats of snow. We actually had snow way early this season. And snow tends to be the sort of forebringer of the end of the bicycle touring season, at least for me. Not because I don't like riding in the snow, but it usually means that it's a lot colder, and so the camping is a lot harder on me. There are a lot of folks who can camp through winter, no problem. But a lot of the trails in the local area where I tend to go, the C&O and whatnot, they tend to really degrade with icy conditions. So as a result, I tend to find somewhere in the December-ish range until probably about March or April is a very quiet season for me from a bike touring perspective. So that's, that's a full 3-4 months where I'm just sitting around just thinking about bike touring rather than actually doing it. So I've got a few things to say about what to do during a bike touring off season. I thought I'd share it with all of you. So let's see, I've got six things, not a round number, but I thought 6 was good because that's what I came up with. 6 things. Number 1, these are in no particular order, as you can probably tell. Number 1, clean your bike. If you are like me, you have you may have multiple bikes like I do that have been through some tours and they are grimy, and you've maybe hosed them down. Maybe you've been pretty good about doing some chain maintenance. And for those of you who listen to the show, you know that's not me, because I'm terrible at chain maintenance. I'm terrible at cleaning my chain. But when I really get down to it and look at my bikes, by the end of the season, they are gritty, gritty, gritty. That just those little crevices, a lot of places where you get some debris buildup. As I mentioned off the show, I mentioned it to the folks in the studio audience and the YouTube audience. I got a flat on my Brompton, and as a result, I actually had to take the rear wheel off for the very first time. I'd never done that before, and all the thousands of miles that I put on this bike. The interesting thing was when I took the chain tensioner off, which is a very particular piece on a Brompton, I noticed how gunked up the chain guides, or the guides in the chain tensioner was, and I realized how just filthy my Brompton was. So I took advantage of the fact that the wheel was off and was able to get into places that I couldn't get at normally. And that's one thing that I would really recommend that you do during a bicycle touring off season, and that's really take apart your bike to the extent that you're comfortable. For some of you, you will strip that thing down to the frame. For those of us who are a little less comfortable with things like derailleurs, that's what the local bike shop is for, the LBS. They take care of all things having to do with derailleurs for me. I will strip things down pretty far down, but I don't get down to the derailleurs, not on this bike, but on the other bike. So, take stuff off and really give it a good cleaning. Get in there, be careful around certain components. Of course, you don't want to be spraying water right into places where if water gets into into your gear, basically into your gearing, you don't want to mess things up with the bearings and stuff like that. But and be very careful about the types of degreasers that you use, because again, sometimes if that gets into where your bearings are, you can really ruin things, whether it's in your headset or in your wheel. So be careful about that. But get in there, your drivetrain especially, that's probably the most important thing. But really get into those nooks and crannies, do the whole thing, give it a real good detailing. I think that off-season is the best time to do that. If you are a full 12-month a year rider, like I know so many of you are, and you use your touring bike for your everyday bike, I mean, I do. I ride both of my bikes pretty much year-round. Giving it a good clean isn't going to be a permanent thing. It's not like your first chore in the spring is going to be, the cleanest situation. It's going to get dirty again, basically, right? That's fine. But I think that taking advantage of a half a day on a weekend or whenever you've got off to give your bike a good cleaning, I think will be a huge benefit. That little bit of grit that gets into, especially your drivetrain, will really reduce the life of both your chain and any of the gearing that you've got, depending on, of course, what kind of gearing you've got. So be mindful of that. Clean your bike, the number one thing that I recommend for off-season bike touring folks. Number 2, assess your gear. I think that this is a great time of year to take a look at everything that you bring on a bike tour. Now, maybe you didn't use some stuff this year, and that might actually be a relevant thing. You may have some stuff that you just don't use anymore. But take a look at all of the different types of things that you've got. Are your waterproof things still waterproof? Do they need to be retreated? Do you need to replace them? Is anything so worn that it needs to be replaced? Those are the types of things that you want to take a look at when you're doing the types of assessment. Is there anything that you'd like to upgrade? I'm wearing right now, because I wear it constantly, when my girlfriend doesn't steal it from me, she knows who I'm talking about too, a merino wool sweater that I upgraded to, I want to say a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago. I think it was a year ago. And I love it. And it's one of those great pieces of clothing that is so great for bike touring. It was high quality. It's really lasted a while. And it's one of those things that this is a good time of year to consider upgrades to things. The famous sweater that I famously lost and talked about in one of the old episodes of the show, I still use that, but I probably don't use it as much because this thing is so much better. And I think that, it's also heavier too. I use that during really much colder times of year. But I asked for this as a Christmas gift. So this is the gift giving season. So this might be an opportunity for you if you have a need, or maybe just a want for upgraded equipment. This would be a good time to assess what you've got, assess what you need, assess what you might want to replace. So that's number 2, and that is assess your gear and act accordingly. Number 3, this is the fun one. declare that there is no off season and travel with your bike someplace else where it's conditions are a little bit better for you. Now, again, some of you are blessed to be in a situation where you don't have an off season, either because you are a registered badass and you will bicycle through anything and you'll tour through anything. For those of us who are not quite that badass, then what I would say is consider, if it is possible, if your finances can handle it, if your schedule can handle it, if your personal life can handle it, your family, whatever obligations can handle it, consider going someplace else during the off season where you live, and go someplace where you can do a tour, even if it's for an overnight or a weekend. Maybe you're going away already on a planned trip, but you can sneak in maybe a bike overnight someplace. That is a really, really restoring type of thing I have found. When I've been able to sneak off to California in the middle of the winter, I've done that and done longer, kind of semi-longer tours, but just even getting out for a day trip can really make a big difference if you're sort of cooped up in Minnesota cold or DC cold, or you've got some kind of crazy snow going on. Go someplace where the conditions are better for you to bike. I can't tell you how great that is. I really, really enjoy it. I am hoping, maybe, possibly, to be able to do something like that this coming winter. I'm looking at maybe a late February, early March kind of a thing. That's when the snow situation here in DC is sort of at its final hurrah, although we do get snow in March. But it's sort of like when I'm at my absolute, I need to get out of here kind of a thing. So I'm looking to possibly doing a tour sometime in late February, because that is a good time for my situation, my obligations, and whatnot. So consider doing that. That's number 3. Declare no off season and go someplace where you and your bike can go have fun together. Number 4, start preliminary planning for next year's tours. This was sort of my go-to thing for off-season tour work, shall we say, when I first started going. So what I did was I would plan the first big tour of the season, and maybe I would look at what couple of tours, or in more recent years I've been able to do several tours, like week-long ones rather than one big one. But I'll tell you what, I remember the winter of 2013 into 2014. That was early Pedalshift days. But it was also the time when I really planned what was going to be a tour from Portland to Minneapolis. And you're thinking to yourself, Tim, I don't remember you ever doing that tour. And the answer is, you're right, I did not, because it was 110 degrees in Eastern Washington. And I said, no, sir, no, ma'am, I'm not going to do that. But that planning was still really helpful for me, even though I never ended up using it. Ask me any question you want about Eastern Washington through Montana to like North Dakota and into Minneapolis. Man, I know my stuff on that. Well, at least I used to. I have a lot of notes on it. Let's just put it that way. And that helped me get through the off season in such a huge way, because I just kept doing lots of research, and I was able to say, oh, okay, well, I'll follow maybe link together a couple of ACA routes and do the Lewis and Clark route with the Northern Tier route and do a cool tour like that. And that's what I ended up doing. And it got me through a really rough winter, which was, weather-wise, it wasn't so great. I lost my grandma, and there was all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And that planning was really, really, really good. So that's something that I would really recommend. And by the way, it's often very cheap, if not free, to just spend time. I mean, it's your time, but you can invest some of the time when it's the weather's not so hot outside, and think about what you might want to do in the next year, or maybe in future years, maybe 10 years from now. It all depends. I know there's a lot of folks who listen to the show who have you aspire to do a bike tour, but you're not sure when that's going to happen. Well, you know what? It's a good time as any to start thinking about how that might look and do the planning for it. So that's number 4. Start preliminary planning for your next tour. Maybe it's next year, maybe it's further off. Number 5. Monitor what you're eating or drinking if you're not biking as much. This is a me problem. This is an absolute me problem. Yeah. So it turns out you burn a lot of calories on the bike. stop me if this is like something that you've heard before. You burn a lot of calories when you're on your bike, and then when you don't bike as much, and you keep drinking the beer, say, like I am, it tends to go into the face. It tends to add a little bit of extra weight, which on your first tour the next year, you got to lug up all those hills. So one of the things that I recommend during the off season is that you watch what you eat and you drink. You may be lucky. You may be the type of person that doesn't have to think about that, or you've got other ways of doing the exercise. I, for some reason, decide not to do any exercise at all once I'm off the bike. I need to do better. I should do better. But for me, it's a little bit easier if I watch what I eat and drink. Starting not now, but like maybe after the holidays. That's usually when it all goes. So number 5, monitor what you're eating and drinking. One little bit of a tip that I found helpful when I'm looking at stuff like that. I use an app called Lose It, which is, I believe, on Android and iOS. I'm an iOS guy, as you probably know. And I would say that that's my favorite one, and it's a good way just to keep track and look at what you're eating. You may be shocked at how many calories you're just mowing down. I know I am. I think I'm eating really good. I've tried to really watch what I eat. I famously quit sugar largely for a long time ago. But you know what? I eat a metric crap ton of calories. So I need to watch that. And an app like that helps me during off season. So number 5, monitor what you're eating and drinking. All right, here's the last one. Number 6. I'm going to put a pause there because guess what? It's cold and our heat just turned on. And the heat makes noise. And the microphone's going to pick that up. Give me 1 second here. Let's see. Can my microphone stretch? Oh, wait. Yes, the microphone can stretch. I have one of those fancy Nest thermostats, so I can do it online. Look at me. We're just taking a little pause here because it will absolutely ruin the noise. Let's see. I just have to remember what my website is for my thermostat. I use the Nest thermostat. I was an early adopter of those, and I kind of like them. Now, I could just get up, but because I'm tethered right now to the phone that is I'm talking to you right now through it, I need to be very careful. So if the wire were not long enough to get me 12 feet that way, which I think I have 10, and I think it's about 12 feet, I would yank that phone and it would just ruin the show. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is let's just knock that down. Oh, Matthew Heller just received a Nest in the mail today. I like them. I'm a fan. I actually bought last year my family, both my parents and my brother one, the new Model E one, and I think the year before that I got Kimberly one here. So I've got them at the cabin in West Virginia. Got one here. My parents and brother have them. Very, very cool. Thank you. By the way, thank you. We're gonna have to wait until that thing turns off. So chat amongst yourselves. Actually, this is a good time for me to check out the chat box here. And remind me, I got to get to number 6 for the podcast. Let's see. Chris Lang, haha, I get wool socks every year for Christmas. That is awesome. Wool socks are fantastic. I don't know if, let's see, I know people like, I like Smart Wool. I have a ton of those. I think Brock Dittis of the Sprocket Podcast is a big fan of the Darn Tough brand. Those are pretty great socks. Of course, for waterproof ones, I think I've talked about this before, the Showers Pass. Fantastic stuff. Keith Spangler, to prevent cold toes, I put duct tape on the outside of my socks. It works and is a talking point when you visit friends at home. I have not tried that. Keith, I'm going to try that. Absolutely. Byron, not Brian Patterson. See what I did there, Byron? I had to call off a mini tour because of really cold weather. My Giro Rumber VR shoes let in too much cold. Even with tape, I wasn't having fun. Yeah, cold feet are an absolute tour killer sometimes. And I think I did a show somewhat recently, I think last winter, how to handle the cold episode. And there were some good ideas in there. I know some people do the trick where they'll go plastic bag in socks on the feet, and then plastic bag and then in shoes, and that can make a big difference. A little vapor barrier and also a wind cutter. So that might be something you might want to try. Matthew, hey Hey, Tim. Hey, Matthew. And you just received the nest. We talked about that. And Ella. Hi, Ella. Good to see you. I'm so thankful for the studded bike tires for my long-haul trucker. I am biking year-round in Alaska when we are not shaking. Ella, we were all a little concerned for Alaska. I'm glad everything seems to have come out right for that. So, yeah, that was a little scary. I was like 7.0 earthquake in Alaska. So yeah, stick strain gives a +1 on the plastic bags. Works great. Yeah, you know what's funny is I think I mentioned that, but I don't think I've ever tried it in a real cold conditions before. But yeah. So yeah. Everybody's saying, Ella, we're happy that you made it through 7.2 on the Richter scale. That's bananas. That's a shake. That's a real shake. When I lived in Japan, I think I mentioned this when I was a teenager, and we had a 5.5, and I was on the subway, and I didn't feel it at all. The train stopped after it, and I get back home, and my parents and my brother are like, oh my god, this horrible earthquake. I'm like, what? I never felt it. So I've been through a 5.5, but I didn't feel it because I guess the shocks on the train were so good. So anyways, Ella, glad you made it. We're thinking about you, Anchorage. You shall rebuild, because I know a lot of stuff shut down, so good on you there. All right, let's see. That darn the noise has not gone away, so I'm just going to have to make up for it in post, so we'll just do it that way. It will probably turn off in a second. Let's see, Ella, you had said one more thing, so I want to get the chat box back up and for me. You recommend the warm Showers Pass socks for the summer. They work great in the winter. Yes, they are. Showers Pass are fantastic. Big fan. I got the jacket too. They're an Oregon company, if I'm not mistaken. They're fantastic. They know the rain. They're really good for waterproof, and they are super warm socks too. So if you are in the bad combo of wet and cold, trust me, I have tested them under the worst of conditions this past March, and yeah, Northwest winters. Yeah, Keith used their rain pants all winter and fall. They're great. They're great. Uncompensated thumbs up from everyone here in the Pedalshift chat box. So, all right, folks, we're going to try to get back on track with the darn. Oh, you know what I might have done? Yep, I turned the wrong thermostat down. I just realized. So there's somebody who's renting my cabin right now who's probably very confused because I turned my West Virginia cabin thermostat down. Whoops. Okay, we're going to change it to the DC one. This is the funniest live show ever. I was wondering why on earth is my heat still going? And here we are. I'll bet you it's going to turn off in like 2 seconds. So let's see. Thank you for bearing with me, by the way. I'm going to take another sip. Man, it would be really funny if somebody like came into this show going, oh wow, cool, bike touring, and they see me fiddling with a thermostat, like live. This is what YouTube was invented for. Strange. Okay, let's see. Ella, when the rain was pouring, I used my insulated extra rough as well. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Oh, Keith says that his heat just went off, so maybe it was me. Sorry, Keith, my bad. I just used my Nest app to turn off everybody's heat. All right, let's see. Let's get back. Let's get this show back on the road. It's going to turn off in a second, I swear. I know I used the right one. So the problem is that they're so eco-conscious at Nest. They're like, oh, so if you turn it so that it's going to turn off, we're going to make sure we keep the fan on to push every ounce of cool or warm air that's left in the system back out so it doesn't just sit there and not do anything. Makes tons of sense. Very good idea. Not awesome for me right now because I would like to continue with the podcast without the fans. We can just keep talking, you know. We can totally do that. Or I can just actually do the podcast. All right. Oh, reminder, while we're kind of in between segments, or sort of in the middle of a segment right here, shoot me an email if you've got a question for the Ask Me Anything segment. I'm happy to answer questions about gear, about tours that I've done in the past, things about the show. If you're familiar with AMA, sometimes people ask people crazy questions. I actually got one in the email box, which has absolutely nothing to do with bike touring. It does say, ask me anything. I will answer anything. Within reason, people. All right. So number 6 on the list of things to do in an off-touring season. This is number 6 of 6, so this is the last one. Get your bike tuned up. Many local bike shops, including here in the wonderful District of Columbia, have winter bike tune-up specials. I think this is an excellent opportunity to support bike shops, especially those LBSs, during the worst season. These cold winter months, they tend to get so much less business, and it's a great opportunity for you to support those businesses with your dollars to get your bike tuned up for the next year. And there's a couple of good reasons for that. Number one, well, of course, you're supporting local businesses, which most of us think is a good thing. The second thing that's really good about that is they often do some really great winter specials because they're having slow times, so they're trying to get more business in, so you'll get your bike tuned up at a much lower rate. And the third thing is, if you have tried to get your bike tuned up in a popular biking city in the spring, you know that sometimes that it can be a week's amount of wait. Weeks until they can actually even consider taking your bike in. And you're like, dude, I want to get my bike going. So get it done in the winter, especially if you're not going to be touching it. It's pretty freaking awesome. I think that would be a really good thing. So get your bike tuned up, take advantage of those winter specials, and also make sure that that you are replacing the things that need to be replaced. A tune-up is not a bike shop trying to upsell you, although I'm sure that many of them are. But they are telling you, look, yo, your chain is stretched way too much, which means you need to also replace your rear gearing as well. You need to take care of that because that's just going to make your bike perform a lot better. You're not doing yourself any favors by kind of riding on gear that isn't performing very well. It can create safety hazards on the road as well. A lot of these folks at the local bike shops will give you good indications of what's a safety issue and what's a weight issue, what's a now issue. It's a great time of year to do it. So I totally recommend that you do that. So let me go back and go through all 6 again. Number 1 thing, and the 6 things to do during bike touring off season. Number 1, clean your bike. Number 2, assess your gear. Number 3, declare there is no off-season and travel with your bike someplace else. That's my favorite. Number 4, start preliminary planning for next year's tours. That's the one I tend to do the most. Number 5, monitor what you're eating and drinking if you're not biking as much. That's the one I should do, but don't do as much as I should. And number 6, get your bike tuned up. Those are the 6 ways to do it, and that is the lab for this episode. Pause again. This is where we have the little ratchety thing. I'm actually going to be doing a couple things right, or one more thing before the AMA. Again, shoot me an email, pedalshift@pedalshift.net if you've got a question. I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5 questions. I got 4 questions. So if you've got any more to ask me, throw that in there. If you're going to throw it in the chat box, we can do that as well. I will do my best to kind of keep up with that. It's not moving too fast. I've been in these before where the chat box is just sort of scrolling and there's just no way I could possibly catch up. So we're pretty chill tonight, so that's very good. Let's see, catch up a little bit on what's been going on in here. Matthew, did I hear that Interbike 2019 is canceled? I did not hear that. That Interbike, if you're not familiar, is sort of the big trade show for bicycling. So I don't know anything about that. I don't know what the why is on that. But one of the things about Interbike and bicycle touring is, well, there's a couple of things. Interbike's had some criticism in the past because it's very salesy and it's very much towards the racing side of things, although it is a pretty broad type of scenario. But it's also, you know, it's usually, I think it's in Vegas a lot, and there's like kind of the booth babe thing, and it's just, it's a thing. And anyways, I've never gone to it. But I do know that it's a big deal in the bike industry. I'm curious. I'm going to check that out. Matthew, thank you for that little bit of info. I'm curious why it was canceled. Keith Spangler, who you're going to hear from in, let's see, 2 weeks. He says, I use Crank Brothers pedals year-round and find that they demand maintenance. I often forget until they break. You see, that is a good reason to give everything a once-over, because breaking is bad. Breaking is bad. Stick string, do you ride a fat bike at all during the winter to stay in shape? You know what? I'm going to throw that into the AMA, sir. In fact, I'm going to copy that. Copy and paste, and yeah, I'm gonna throw that. You're gonna get that number 1 in the AMA, sir. Thank you for that. All right, cool. All right, so we're gonna get to the AMA in a second. I'm all caught up in here. thank you all for joining, by the way. It's been a lot of fun tonight. It's always a lot of fun. I'm going to take another sip here. By the way, I had a second can here. I was all super excited because I thought, oh, I'm going to run out as usual. It's hard to drink when you're talking a lot. Okay. Powered by Chocolate Stout. Here we go. Next up on the show, a little teeny tiny segment that I'd like to throw out there because it's recognition of the 5-star reviews that I'm getting on iTunes for the show. Thank you so much. I like to recognize the folks that give 5-star reviews here on the show because I am a vain, horrible person. But I really appreciate it because when you do these reviews, especially on, I said iTunes, it's Apple Podcasts now. If you do that, there is some mythical, magical magic in Cupertino that when you do something like that, it actually helps the rankings. It helps things be seen a little bit more, and that's just super exciting. So I've got I think 2 new ones. If I'm rereading one of these, that's my bad because I don't get into I don't sit there and wait for the reviews to come in. Every once in a while I'll go, oh, I should check the reviews, and I got 2 new ones. So Tailwind, 5 stars. By Go Contra. And this was back in September. What a wonderful podcast with a ton of info. Tim really puts the fire in you to ride your ride. Thank you. And then 3 little bicycle emojis after that. Apparently we can put emojis in these now. That is awesome. Thank you to Go Contra. I almost called you Tailwind, but that's what you said. Oh, and Byron here in the live chat room says, and an angel gets swings every time you get a 5-star review on the Pedalshift project. Thank you. Ding, new winged angel. We got a second winged angel coming along from RFJ_2. Very catchy, memorable handle. The best bike touring podcast. There's not that many bike touring podcasts, but I truly appreciate that I am in his opinion the best bike touring podcast. 5 stars. A pug-powered pedal fest. My 3 pugs absolutely adore this part. Tim has the best bike touring podcast on the web. Tour planning, tips, techniques, gear, routes, interviews. He has it all, except the ability to read, apparently. He continues. He also has the audio quality / podcast technique down and presents the podcast really well. He is clearly well prepared, but doesn't take himself too seriously. Also check out his tour journals. Thank you, RFJ_2. I really appreciate that. Look, I remember back in... I think it was 2013 when I started this. I was really excited about bicycle touring, and I was like, oh, cool, let's check out the bicycle touring podcast. And there were a few, but they had stopped doing them pretty much for the most part. And I was like, boy, there's no bike touring podcast. And I was like, well, I do podcasts. I could do a bike touring podcast. And boom, here we are, 145 episodes later, which is crazy. I think I've mentioned this on past shows. The longest episode of any podcast that I've ever done before, the most episodes, has always been 50. So when I got to number 50 of this show, I was like, whoa, I guess we're still going. So thank you all for sticking around and listening to this drivel, this nonsense, this me yammering away. What's crazy is when I started the show, I never thought in a million years that I'd be able to do anything more than a monthly show. That's what the show was when we first started, because I didn't think I had that much to say. Now we're to weekly with a best of cheat in there. It's not cheating, it's a best of. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. So anyways, thank you all for listening to the show, for your support and everything. I'm super excited to see these 5-star reviews. It helps make me realize you like me, you really like me. Really, you like the show. It's you could give or take me. That's fine. That's fine too. But thanks so much for the 5-star reviews. An angel gets his or her wings. And do angels have genders? They may have genders. I don't know. It's 2018. It's cool. Angel gets wings. Ding. Every time you get a 5-star review. So there we go. Let's see. We're going to now move on to the Ask Me Anything segment of the show. And this is going to be a little bit tricky because I'm going to try to do this through emails I've gotten already at the top of the show. Thank you for those of you who sent them in ahead of time. Thank you for folks in the chat room. And thank you for folks who maybe kind of throwing them this way right now. So I've got a bunch of questions. Let's see. We're going to start off with Stickstring in Michigan because he is here in the chat room. The beautiful state of Michigan shaped like a hand. If you're unfamiliar, if you ever meet somebody from the state of Michigan, ask them to do the hand trick where they show you on their hand what part of the state they're from. It's amazing. It's my favorite thing. I have family from there. So Stickstring asks, do you ride a fat bike at all during the winter to stay in shape? And the answer to that is no. And in fact, I've never ridden a fat bike, not even once. Mysterious James has a fat bike, and I've looked at it in his place in San Francisco, and I've thought, that looks pretty cool. And I've seen lots of people riding them around. I've literally never even ridden one. I need to do that because I think a fat bike on the C&O in winter would be really, really cool. Problem, I don't own one. I don't know anybody in DC who owns one, and I need to fix that. I might consider looking to rent one sometime this winter. I think that's a really good idea. What a great way to stay in shape during winter, because, man, you can just get all geared up. I used to snowshoe when I lived in the Northwest, and I loved winter sports, and it was a really fun thing to do. So, yeah, that might be something to look at, Stickstring. Thank you for that question. I look forward to that possibility. Let's see. Keith asks, Keith Spangler, who you'll again hear from in a future episode. Tim, do you think waving at motorists or showing appreciation to them for giving you room is helpful to making goodwill? I think that's a great question, Keith. I find myself feeling really positive. I have the right attitude, but that attitude changes all the time. I find that I always like talking or giving a wave to other bicyclists and other motorcyclists wherever I'm at, except when I get closer to cities. So when I get into the sort of immediate suburbs of a city, I find that I get into city mode, and I think other people do too. You don't typically wave a lot in the city. Like walking on the sidewalk out here, if I just started waving to people, it would be you just don't, it's just not done. I think it's the country mouse city mouse thing, right? So I think that I change my attitude a little bit depending on where I'm at. I don't know if anybody else has that kind of a scenario, but I would say that it can be really, really good, especially in areas maybe that have a reputation where rural areas I'm talking about that have a reputation of not being so cool to cyclists. I've read a ton of different folks have found that, you know, they've gotten really good interaction with motorists when they give a wave ahead of time. Especially when they're approaching from the rear, or, you know, they're in a place where there aren't any shoulders. Anytime that you can really show that you're sharing the road as opposed to sort of commanding it, you know, that might be a helpful thing. Man, and that's a really complicated, layered question, because I know that there are a lot of folks who are more activists in the bicycling community are sort of like, yo, this is our road just as much as the cars too. So I think that that's an interesting, complicated question depending on where you are. I tend to try to kill them with kindness no matter where I'm at, which I'm sure surprises nobody who's listening. But that's kind of what I do. So we're seeing a lot of people say they wave always. That there's nothing wrong with waving. Let me just leave it at that. I mean, I don't think you could do too much waving. You can't be too overly nice. It might be considered a little weird, overly weird if you're a little bit too much, but hey, I'm cool with it. And I do think that, I've said this before on the show, I kind of closed the thought on this. We are ambassadors when we're out there on a bicycle tour, and we're ambassadors for everybody else who is out there bicycle touring as well. So if somebody out there doesn't represent real well, that tends to reflect on the rest of us. So my big thing is I try to be extra super cool and make sure that when I leave a scenario, when I leave any kind of an interaction, somebody's like, man, that was a cool situation right there. I like people who do this. That's sort of how I do that as well. Keith, I normally give them the peace sign. Peace sign's awesome. I do that a lot. I think in some countries it's actually it's sort of like giving the finger. So be mindful of that where you are. Here in the States, no problem. So yes, thank you, Keith. I appreciate that. Let's see, next question. Let's see. This one was from a listener in Columbus, Ohio. Do you prefer to tour on a Brompton or on a full-size bike? These all came by email, by the way. And I should also throw open an email just to make sure. Byron, I got one from Byron. Byron, I'll get yours next. Okay, so do you prefer to tour on a Brompton or on a full-size bike? From Columbus, Ohio. I think that the answer is it depends. I prefer riding the right bike for the right tour. And I have found that depending on how my travel scenarios are, I may choose the Brompton over the full-size bike. I think that generally speaking, my Safari, the Novara Safari, which is now the REI Co-op brand, it's got a different name, that bike can do anything anywhere. And if I were to say that one of those bikes is a better performer, or compare the performance, every single time that's the better bike. However, that bike has to be boxed up or has to be transported in much more annoying ways, shall we say, if I'm going long distances. So the Brompton actually is a much better choice for many of my tours. So I wouldn't say that I prefer one over the other so much. I would say that I do think that there's more comfort and better performance on the Safari, but some tours, depending on the travel scenarios, the fast forwards that may be happening, the Brompton's the better choice. And I kind of like them both. I like the extra challenges that the Brompton throws my direction. If I really want to tackle a long route with lots of hills, and perform well, like try to make 60, 70 miles minimum a day, I'd rather be on the Safari. So hope that answers that question. Let's see, Byron from Australia. He asks, number one, for bike packing, would you prefer to save weight or be more aero? And I will answer that one first because the second question is a different question. I would say for bike packing, save weight or be more aero. In many instances, I would say, in my experience at least, as I've kind of started to move more towards a bike packing setup, I would never say, and the bike packers out there would never say that I bike pack at all. In fact, on Reddit, I've read that. They're right. I would not consider me a bike packer per se. I would say that I have found that when I pare my gear down, I'm getting both. Because what I'm doing is I'm kind of rotating those side panniers. I'm now, for the video folks, you can see the side panniers are giving a lot of that sort of wind resistance. But as I kind of rotate things around so that I get more aerodynamicness, I'm also losing some weight because I'm not carrying as many bags. So I would say if I had a preference between the two, I think I would say the aero thing is a really big deal. In a way that I never expected. Less weight always makes a difference too, but I have to say, when I have been in headwinds and I've been in the more bike packy kind of setup that I've been doing in the last year or so, I will tell you that there is a measurable difference. If you're talking about a lot of weight saved, then maybe I would go with the weight. But if you're only talking maybe like 5 pounds or something like that, I'd go aero. At least in my experience, folks who are more bike packing types, you should chime in because I think that's an excellent question. I think the answer is both, because most bike packing setups are super low in weight and they're aero just by their very nature. So question number 2 from Byron, not Brian. Have you considered 3D printed parts or accessories for your tour bikes? This is an awesome question that Mysterious James would go crazy for. I'm just telling you right now. I've added a third bottle holder under the triangle that survived a locked front wheel crash. Wow, that's crazy. Currently trying to make a feed bag holder. That is a really, really interesting question. The reason why I mentioned Mysterious James would be into that is he's got a thing for the 3D printing thing in recent years, and has just been fascinated about the different types of uses that there are for it. I love the technology of it. I still have not found a use for it quite yet. I think where it might be most useful when I've sort of thought about it in the bike touring context is if I've got something where maybe a part breaks that's a small plastic part or small part on a larger type of thing, and it's sort of like you can't get a replacement for that. This is a bad example because Ortlieb does have replacement parts, but there's a lot of the plastic buckles and things that they have that break all the time on the back rollers, and just because I use them all the time, there's tons of use on it. Wouldn't be a terrible idea if I could 3D print one of those types of things. Because as you noted, the plastics are the polymers that they use are incredibly strong and flexible when you need to use them. There's all sorts of different ones that you can use. So I think that the technology is fantastic and it's definitely something to look into. I have not myself come up with a real world use scenario outside of maybe a new buckle strap. But I haven't done it because the example that I used, for instance, with the Ortlieb panniers, is those are easily available at my local bike shop. I can just go around the corner and grab those. So it's a lot easier than kind of sourcing out a 3D printer or someone 3D printer and the design for it and waiting for it. It takes a while. 3D printing is not super quick. You probably knew that. Anyways, thank you for that, Byron, and good luck. Keep me posted on that. I think that's fascinating. That's like 2019 kind of stuff, man. That's jetpacks, man. That's we live in the future kind of stuff. So thank you for that question. Let's see. I want to go into the chat box, see if we got any more questions here from the chat box, folks, before I dip into the email, folks. Yes. Oh, Keith is, for the folks who are not in the chat box and you're listening on the podcast, Keith is letting people know, giving a little preview for the episode coming up right before Christmas that he will be on. Thanks again, Keith, for that interview. It was a lot of fun. Let's see. Next question that I've got was from a friend of the show in the Bay Area of the United States in California. What is your next tour? Excellent question. Normally on the live show, as historically, we have a tradition that I announce my next tour on the live show. I don't have that for you. I really don't. I am looking at, as I'd mentioned, I think in the pre-recording parts of the show, I am considering a winter tour someplace with better weather than the Washington, D.C. area. That said, it's still December, and I might, for my next tour, I might be able to sneak in an overnight on the C&O. I was talking to Kimberly, my girlfriend, the other day, and I was like, sort of, almost a little sad, for lack of a better word, that, man, I just didn't ride the C&O that much this year, and it's a real bummer. It's like, I feel like it's my backyard. It's like, it's a very long, skinny backyard. It's 184.5 miles, and I just didn't ride. This is the first year that I didn't through ride it in a long time, years, five years or more. And that's a real bummer to me because I love that trail, as you all know. I just didn't get out there that much. I didn't even do a lot of overnights there. And, you know, so I think that if you were in the betting markets, where's Tim going to do an overnight next? I'd say the C&O is probably your best bet. We get into February, March, I may look, let's see, Kenny mentioned Florida, come on down. Florida is definitely one of the ones that I'm looking at. Someone else, and forgive me, I wish I don't have the emails in front of me. Another friend of the show, and I think a Pedalshift Society member, just did the Florida Keys. And I have never been to Key West, and that is kind of on my list. I'm also a bit of a national park nut, and there's a national park called Dry Tortugas, which you can only get to from Key West. It's this really remote island way out. That would be, I would love to do a tour where I go out to Key West and maybe get to Dry Tortugas. I'm one of those nerds that has the passports that you get stamped at the national parks. That's me. I'm that guy. I'm the guy who buys those things. That would be cool. I'm sort of toying with that, but I am also finding that the camping scenario, it's full on season, and camping is very expensive. It's very RV oriented, but there are warm showers hosts out there. I've never done warm showers before. So I don't know. I'm thinking about that. That's an opportunity. The other thing that I was thinking was possibly, and I would do that by Brompton, by the way. That would be the other kind of fun trick. The other one that I was looking at was a tour of the California coast. I love California, and I am finding, I'll tell you, folks, the wildfire seasons are just brutal. And I feel like when I typically go, or have typically gone historically, there are wildfires that are impacting the California coast every year. Oregon too, quite frankly. And I'm thinking that if I want to sneak in a California trip and not be impacted by a wildfire, man, I'll tell you, maybe it's time to think about doing it in the winter, so or late winter, early spring. It can be rainy. That's when the rains start to decrease a little bit on the West Coast, as we saw on my Washington trip. So I am thinking possibly a San Francisco to Santa Barbara trip. I haven't done south of San Luis Obispo since the 14 ride. And I would really like to get back there again. That's another one that I'm toying around with. I'm noticing folks in the chat room are sort of like, hey, I'll go with you to Key West. Look, everybody wants to go to Key West in February. Yes, please feel free. If I end up doing it, yeah, maybe we can do that. I'm terrible to ride with, though. I'm just telling you. You think I'm all cool talking on the podcast? I'm the worst person to ride with. Ask Mysterious James. He's the only person who rides with me. Matthew Heller in the chat box says, I am planning Fort Lauderdale to Key West to Naples to Fort Lauderdale tour this winter. That's a pretty dope ride. Florida is interesting. I've heard a lot of contradictory things about the quality of the roads, the quality of the shoulders, and more importantly, how drivers will interact with you. I've been hearing in more recent years, or more recent months, as I've been doing research for the Keys, that the Keys is actually, there's a huge big shoulder and the riding is fantastic. So that's the one that I'm thinking about. Other parts of Florida I hear are kind of so-so from folks who are down there, but your mileage may vary depending on your route, of course. Let's see, Keith says, a Pedalshift tour to Key West 2019. That has a ring to it. What would we be up to? We'd be up to Tour Journals Volume 13. Well, there's your lucky number. Nothing bad could happen on my 13th tour journal, right? Let's see what's next. I've got a couple of more. I'm just keeping an eye on time because I don't want to keep people too late here. Thanks, by the way, everybody in the chat room. Thank you for joining. For those of you on the podcast, as always, thank you for listening and not hitting fast forward. Well, you could do that if you'd like, but we have a new question now, and it is one of those questions that has nothing to do with bicycle touring, and I love from Illinois. Marvel or DC, Star Wars or Star Trek? Okay, so this is easy. See, I think that Scott here thought that this was going to be a hard question, but it's actually easy. Okay, it's always Marvel. Marvel always over DC. I got much love for some of the DC stuff. We're talking comic books, by the way, here, folks who, if you're not in the know. I collected the books in kind of the 80s, 90s range, and dipped into some of the old 70s stuff for a while. Yeah, big into the Marvel stuff. I love that. DC, I can give some love to the Teen Titans stuff. The Perez run in Teen Titans. I thought that was pretty good. Yeah. But I'm big on Marvel, and yes, I'm into the movies too. Black Panther, holy moly, that was just one of the best movies of the year. Freaking incredible. And the DC movies are garbage, except Wonder Woman was good. I like that. But you did not ask that question. You just said Marvel or DC, so I'm going Marvel. Star Wars or Star Trek? This is tighter. This is tighter, but I still think overall, my childhood was dominated by the Star Wars. I was, I think I was 6 years old when New Hope came out. I saw that in the theater when I was a little kid. I mean, I was in the wheelhouse for Star Wars age-wise when it came out. So I have to go with that. Now, I did get into Star Trek a little bit. That was on TV, but the original series felt a little dated. I got into it after Next Gen. I liked that. But and I have nothing bad to say about Star Trek. But if you were to say which one do I prefer, I'm a Star Wars guy, and I know that there's a whole bunch of psychological stuff that tells you a lot about a person by Star Wars or Star Trek. So Marvel and Star Wars. That's your answer there. Thank you for that question. That's a true AMA kind of question. Let's see. Last but not least, if we don't have anybody in the chat room, and I'm going to check email as well. No. Okay, then we're going to go for the last question. And let's see. It is, any plans for in-person events in 2019, like episode 100 meetup at the Beer Mongers in Portland? Do I have any plans? The answer is yes. That sounded qualified, didn't it? I think I should say yes, because I would really like to. I've got something in the cards in January, and I kind of mentioned that, I think, towards the top of the show, at least for the chat room folks. Not enough to announce yet, but super excited about it. More to come on that. And I think there's a possibility of doing some more stuff down the line as well. If anybody's interested in that, please feel free to shoot the emails over my direction. I do like to travel a little bit. I like to get on the West Coast because I know there's a lot of folks who listen to the show on the West Coast. A lot of folks in Chicago, a lot of folks in Texas, a lot of folks in the near East Coast, like New York to DC kind of a thing, but of course internationally as well. I don't know yet, so I don't know the answer to that, but I think that there are some things brewing And I hope to be able to answer that a little bit more definitively, maybe perhaps in the next week or so. So stay tuned for all of that. Something is brewing for January, so at least in the DC area. So if you're in the DC area or would like to come to the DC area in January, because who doesn't like to come to the Washington, DC area in January? Trust me, it's better than July. That's all I have to say about that. Folks, that's it. I'm out of questions. It's an Ask Me Anything that I'm out of questions. So that's it. Thank you for emailing. Thank you for the chat room. Thank you for everybody who asked questions. Thank you, Bellstar, for stopping making that sound. I can tell that she is ready for this podcast to be over. Oh, wait, we got one more question in the chat room. Brian asks, Brompton equals the challenge and adventure of using the wrong tool for the job. Oh, I think that was a qualified statement-ish question. I like that. I agree with you, Brian, because I think that the Brompton is an incredible piece of technology, an incredible machine, but it is limited. It has compromises. I mean, if you're watching the video version of this, you can see it is literally over my shoulder, folded up. It can fit in an overhead compartment of most airlines. It is remarkable that a bike of that quality can actually fold up and go that small. That said, the gearing isn't as good as on some of the other bikes that I've ridden, including I keep gesturing over towards where my other bike is for those of you who are in the live room. But you know, there are compromises that you make in any kind of a situation when you make choices. And for this, you get such extreme portability, but you do give up a few things in terms of how much performance you get out of it. And you're right, it can be the wrong tool for the job. I've ridden this bike up Big Sur, and I'm telling you, this bike is not, straight up just not designed for that. But it can do it. And I like taking it places where it's maybe not supposed to go. I'm sure the Brompton people would be like, oh, no, it can go any place, and they're right. But it's not really designed for that. I did a couple of modifications on the gearing to really get it lower so it can handle the hills a little bit better. But yeah, sometimes you hop off and walk too. There's that. So Brian, thank you for that. And with that, we will close out the AMA. Thank you so much for all your questions. I really, really appreciate that. And that also closes out this episode of the Pedalshift Project. Thanks so much for joining, and we will see you next time. All right, live room. I'm going to have to close that way better. I may even do that. I may cut off some of that because you know, in my normal close, it's thank you for joining. And I always hate it when I say thank you for joining and then thank you for joining. It's redundant. We don't want that. But thank you for joining. Stickstring, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for questions. Thank you, everybody. I'm pointing at the camera. I'm gesticulating wildly. Thank you. Cheers to you all. This will be episode number 145 of the Pedalshift Project, which will be coming to your podcatcher, your podcast app of choice. Let's see, next Thursday. I do not know what day that would be. That would be, I guess, the 13th of December at the normal time of 7 a.m. Eastern Time. And as I mentioned, the following week, we'll have Keith's show. Great interview today. I'll get that all edited up, and that's actually that's an extra long show that may be close to an hour. So we've got a lot of good content coming to you for the next couple of weeks, and then the week after that is the end of year special, which I'm not going to tell you about because it hasn't happened yet, and I'm always worried about saying things that haven't happened yet. So for now, thank you for joining on the last live episode of the Pedalshift Project Live. We will be back with more live shows sometime early in 2019, maybe like February-ish. We'll have to kind of think about doing all of that. And thank you also for all of your support with the Pedalshift Society. If you're interested in joining that, it's straight up broken. I'm going to have to rework some things. So I think literally, as I said that, Kenny, you said you were having problems putting your credit card in. It's because it's broke, and I'm going to fix that hopefully tomorrow. So if you're interested in supporting the show, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, like what you watch, it is a great help to get those itty bitty little bit of it's not a ton of money from you, but believe it or not, it all adds up and can help me go on more tours and do more stuff like this and buy lights like this thing that's pointing at me right now that may be too bright when I put my hand here, but it's fine over here, right? So thanks so much for joining, everybody. Look forward to getting this out for you next week. Thank you very much. Have a great night. And now the hardest thing in the world, how do I turn this thing off? It's that X right there.